Hello and welcome to the part 3 of Azure App Service. In today's session, we are going to discuss the scaling feature within Azure App Service Plan. So let's try to understand this from the web application perspective. Say you are an owner of web application in which you host products where users they come and buy these products. And like any other service, a web application, you need to have some sort of compute where your web application is hosted. A compute is nothing but a CPU, RAM, and a storage capacity. And on this, you are running your web application. And say the name of this application is mahadev.com. So in a normal scenario, the users they come over here. So say two users they come and buy the products from here, right? But now your application is getting popular. More and more users they know about your application, and this user count maybe doubles, right? In normal circumstances it's two, but now there are four people who are coming and buying these and accessing this application. Now what happens if your web application underneath doesn't have the resources so that it can scale, and it can meet the demand of these users who are coming over there and accessing this application? The user they will experience downtime, and that is where you need to have scaling capabilities, right? And there are two ways you can scale it. There is vertical scaling and there is horizontal scaling. And I'll explain that. So let's understand this with. So vertical scaling, as you know, that basically increasing the capacity on this individual server. So say this server has one CPU with 1 gig of RAM and you got 1 gig of storage. When I say vertical scaling, you can increase this maybe to 2 CPU, 2 gig of RAM, or maybe 2 gig of storage. So on the same box, you're adding more compute, you're adding more storage, RAM, and CPU. That is what vertical scaling means. But what do you mean by horizontal scaling? Now, say for example, if I add one more box over here, right? So I have one box, I will add one more box here. Now there are two instances of this application running. That is what horizontal scaling means. Basically, I'm adding more nodes, I'm adding more instances, and I'm adding this application on these instances. That is what the horizontal scaling means. These are the two options available for you. And I'm going to show this on the Azure portal. So as you know that so far we know that we have deployed an application with the name Mahadev, and this application is running on an app service plan, which is nothing but the compute resources that you're going to deploy. But when your application is getting popular, you want to scale it, you have these two options. You have vertical and horizontal option, and you can do this manually or you can automate that process. Hopefully you understand this. So let's go to the Azure portal, and we're going to use the same application that we've been using in the entire track. And let me go and expand this. And if you can see under settings, I have this option of scaling up and scaling out. So let's go and expand this. So right now I'm using the standard tier. Now vertical scaling means that I can increase the compute power, maybe going to the P1 V2, P2 V2, or even isolated tiers. If I go and apply this, it means that I'm expanding this vertically or scaling this vertically, right? That is what scale up means, vertically, which is pretty straightforward. Let's look at the scale out option too. So if I go over here, under scale out, I have two options. I can manually scale it. So right now I have one instance of this application, as you can see, running. If I want, I can increase this count. So say for example, now depending upon what tier of that web application plan you're choosing, there is a limit of how many instance count you can go. Now because I'm on the standard tier, the maximum I can go is 10. One is already running, so I can go more and add 9 more. Let's say I want to increase this number to 3, right? And now I'm going to save it. It's updating the resources in the backend. And now if I go to the overview, you can see that under app service plan, I have 3 instances of this web application which is running, right? This is manual way of increasing the instance count basically. But we can also automate this, and I'm going to show you based on different parameters that we can add. But you can see the number has been increased from 1 to 3. But again, as I said, you need to be mindful of how many instances you can increase. It will depend upon what application tier you are in, right? But let's go back to the scale out option. You also have this option of increasing this custom auto scale. So let's go and pick this. And if I go and expand this, you see I have a couple of options. I can scale to a specific instance count, which is nothing but increasing the by using manual scale, or I can scale it based on metric. Now, if I pick this, there is a couple of options. I can add a rule here. So let me go and open this up. And Azure gives me a couple of options over here. Now you have the metric resource right over here based on current resource. Now you can pick the criteria. You can go average, minimum, maximum, but I'm going to pick the default. And this is the metric that I can add. Under the metric name, I can scale up or scale down based on CPU, data in or data out, right? How much data in which is coming, or the data out which is going out of those network. I can also base it on disk queue length. So there are a couple of options, memory percentage, but the more common metric which are generally used is CPU or the memory. It's the best way we can correlate to it, right? So let's pick the default, which is CPU percentage, right? And if I scroll down, right now, it's very basic application. We are just testing it out, and on an average the count is just under 3%. Now what I can do is I can put certain metrics over here or certain condition. So if my CPU percentage, say, goes greater than or equal to, say, 80%, and it is for the duration, say, of 5 minutes on an average, increase the count by 1. So the number of instances, as you can see that right now it is 3. So if I take this example, it should add 1 more if my CPU percentage on an average on these instance count in the backend goes more than 80%, right? So increase that by 1. And you can also have the cooldown period, right? I'm keeping this to 5. So on an average for 5 minutes, then this condition will trigger again, and then it will add 1 more count. But the important thing to remember, if the average CPU percentage on my instances reaches 80%, increase the number of instance count by 1. I can increase this number further too, but right now that is what we are adding. I'm going to click on the add button, and make sure that you also click on the save, right? So we have added this metric of scaling it up, right? But do remember, in any cloud service, you're paying for how many instances are running. So you want to make sure that once that peak traffic goes away, you're able to scale back, right? So you don't want to have those 3 or 4 instances running all the time. So you can also add another rule. So I can go and click on add rule, and now I'm going to keep all the other parameters same, but now what I'm going to say is that if my CPU percentage is less than 40%, right, the action it's going to take is decrease the count by 1 instance, right? So if my CPU percentage on an average reaches less than 40%, or I can make it equal to 40% even, right, reduce the instance count by 1. And I can just click on the add button here, right? and click on the save. So with this way, I don't need to keep a track. I don't need to go manually and change the number of instances, right? It will have intelligence, it's built in into it, right? And it will automatically add the instance and remove the instances based on the rules that we have specified. And just want to add one more thing here. So by the way, you see both these rules are added over here, right? And in the backend, basically, though it's feature of Azure App Service, in the backend it is Azure Monitor. So if I can go and open up Azure Monitor, if I go and open the application, actually my bad, not under the application. If I go under settings, you see you have the auto scale feature. And if you go expand that, you can see that our app service plan with the instance count and the configuration or the changes that we made in the metrics are there. So basically it is using Azure Monitor in the backend, though it's integrated within the Azure App Service. But going back to my app service here, you can see now because it is integrated here, right under the scale out, I have this option and now it has been added over here too, right? So I can also add other rules too. I can add also other conditions also. Like for example, if you want to schedule this at during specific time of the day or the week, you can also start or end date. You can also add that too. But the important thing here is that you have this capability of scaling your web application both vertically as well as horizontally, and it can be all automated. Hopefully this gives you an idea about the scaling capabilities within Azure App Service. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.